It's six.
It's six. It's seven. 6, 7. We're here. Yay.
We're here. Okay. So we are back with round 2 of Recovery on the Real. We just don't know what we're doing. We thought that we like to have genuine conversations with each other. So we just kind of thought we would have those genuine conversations with you because we've been in this field a really long time, and the field of mental health and recovery. And we just want people to know what we go through. But also we want you to also know that just because you aren't in this field doesn't mean that like you can't also be in the brain space with us, because we're all doing this stuff together. So what are we talking about tonight? We have a great topic.
We do. We have a great topic about this health and wellness and time of instability, but we're going a little bit deeper. I think we went pretty deep last time for people that were with us on this last time, about all sorts of field-related and personal issues that we see, but we did write down an agenda.
We did, and so here's the deal. We're gonna introduce ourselves first, because I'm not gonna assume that anybody on Danny's feed knows who I am, and I'm not gonna assume that anybody on my feed knows who Danny is. So it's just good to set the tone. So who are you? What do you do? And what's a thing that we're both challenged by during this time? And also, people who are listening, feel free to write your comments and questions in. We will try to get to them if we can. Hi, Laura. Hi, Chris. But why don't you go first?
Sure. So hi, I am Danielle Tarino. By day, I run a cybersecurity company and a large national nonprofit in the recovery space called Young People in Recovery. And by evening, I join my friend Chelsea on Facebook Live to talk about issues that we don't talk about enough in the field. I am a hardcore advocate for people in recovery, for social justice, for all of the intricate and different issues that we face every day in this field and as people. And most importantly, I'm a person in long-term recovery from a substance use disorder, and do my best to actually never lead with that. But I think in this particular setting, it's relevant and it's important, because I think tonight we're going to talk about burnout, and we're going to talk about grief, and we're going to talk about what it's like to try to keep multiple businesses above the ground during a global pandemic while you're simultaneously trying to survive during a global pandemic, with the added bonus of being helpers in the helper field. So we are deeply empathetic and affected because we've been in a pandemic as a field for many years. And so now we have double pandemic.
Pandemic. We've been in multiple pandemics in one, with no end in sight. Well said. And Danny, I know you just lost people really close to you. How are you doing?
I'm doing. Who are you first, and then we'll dive in. You didn't introduce yourself.
Okay, so my name is Chelsea. I am also a person in long-term recovery. I've struggled most of my life with anxiety and trauma. And that also trickles into substance use and food and all other sorts of stuff that I haven't quite mastered yet, but work in progress. I am based in the suburbs of Chicago. For the last 12 years, I've been privileged to run Live for Lolly, which is a harm reduction and peer recovery organization. We help hundreds, if not thousands, of people a year on their journey, and their families and professionals who work with them. I gave that up a few months ago to focus on being a mom. So I have a almost 2-year-old son. I cannot believe he's almost 2. Just trying to get out there and do other things in the space that feel good and that are needed at this time. I'm just trying to be useful. So I've been saying, just use me in whatever way that you can, if that's appropriate, and that you think I might be helpful for. And that's the kind of role I'm trying to play, is just being a connector and an advocate like you. And I'm a licensed social worker. I actually do work in private practice. In fact, right before this, I was running a treatment group by Zoom, go Zoom for treatment, with a bunch of women who are lovely and amazing and also in recovery from many things. And I am really, this has been a tough week. I mean, really, that's just the tip of the iceberg. But I am kind of, I feel very confused a lot about what's happening in our world, what's happening locally, and what I'm supposed to be doing in all of this. And, you know, just the anxiety and the stress that just comes with that pressure, but also wanting to help people like find a path in advocacy, whatever that is, trying to be a champion for change makers. Or people who want to create change. I'm also like really passionate about getting people out from their phones and from screens and actually going and doing something aside from being proactive and talking about real issues online. That is a huge thing, and being aware and like an advocate online is great, but what do you do after that? That's what I'm trying to help people with. So that's where
we're here. We're trying to like stir the pot to give you ideas or guide you in the direction. And I mean like good trouble. We're stirring the pot for good trouble, to take and to use this as resources. And it's so funny because you said to get away from the screen. I used my cell phone to prop up my computer here. Because I needed like a little bit more height here, and also B, because it stops me from compulsively checking my cell phone, because sometimes I do it even when I'm on live stream such without even realizing it, because it's become such a it's become part of my body, which scares me a little bit. And yes. And I think that part of grief, which we're going to talk about a little bit today, for me has been the death doom scroll, while not at all comforting, has become an obsessive compulsive behavior that I use to tap out, and that I use to disassociate with the current grief that I feel. And, you know, I think trauma is the word of the week for a lot of people, different people, that means a lot of different things. But I think some things happened on the world stage, specifically in my old hometown of Washington, D.C., that have triggered some old unfamiliar feelings of discomfort and non-safety. And so, yeah, I've been doing the one finger death scroll to my own disadvantage this week. Grief. So yeah, I'm just gonna jump in, Jess. We're jumping in.
We're jumping in. So and we're doing this because we're trying to be more vulnerable, and we're trying to get our people in our life, in the communities that we are in, to try and just be more vulnerable and have a place to do that that's safe. So
we're creating this is a container for a social conversation that has to start with being honest, especially as professionals in this field who often are taking on stories all day about other people's grief and trauma. Hard stop, regardless of how you participate in this field, we are absorbing and empathizing and sympathizing with a lot of information all day that's pretty traumatic and pretty full of grief. And I can't do that functionally, not that I think I have been lately, to be honest with you. I can't function, and I work and act in dysfunction when I'm not acknowledging my own grief. And for me today, that is, I lost two grandparents, both of whom I was very close with, to COVID. So I'll say unexpectedly. In the past month, my grandmother died on Thanksgiving, and my grandfather died the week before Christmas. And yesterday, actually, another dear friend of mine in my life for 10 years passed away last night. And so it's compounding, and I find myself in this place of, it's deep grief. I'm not good with grief, apparently. And there is this added, I'm not going to call it bonus grief, added component of grief that comes from that we had time robbed from us for the past 10 months since the shutdown, began and COVID protocols started being put into place to protect one another, we've been robbed of all of this time with each other. So I didn't realize that this was my last 10 months on this planet with either of them in this plane, in this physical realm. And there's a sense of grief about that there's not a lot of literature on yet, that my scientific brain wants like solutions and answers about how do I deal with these two different types of competing grief. And what did people do in other pandemics? We have no idea, because we weren't talking about like mental health landscapes during the Spanish flu. And so, yeah, I just wanted to share that, and that if you are out there and you're grieving, you are absolutely not alone in the grief is complex, added on to this complexity of we've been robbed of a year of our lives, and so many other things. And that time, very precious time, has been stolen. And it's been stolen. And I think that's the bottom line, that we've been robbed of time, that the system has failed us as Americans. We've been fundamentally failed in how all of this was handled. So we have time being robbed from us as people all over the place. And I'm going to shut up.
You just said, I think, what so many people are thinking or trying to put into words and maybe have trouble saying, including myself. And I'm so sorry for your losses. I was so close to my grandparents, and I have one living grandparent, and I worry about her daily. So I do understand a little bit of what you might be going through, or what the fear around that. And then every day while we're feeling our grief and living this loss, we have to watch a bunch of people talk about everything chaotic that's going on in the world and feed off of that and have all sorts of opinions about it. And we're just, and we can't get to them. We can't have anybody. It feels like there's a barrier between us on the ground and the people making decisions and the people deciding how the message is going to get out. It feels the locus of control in and of itself is so prolific that we're forced to find ways to have control somehow. And that can really take us down a deep and dark path if we aren't aware. And it has. There's more suicides. We're seeing more overdoses. We're seeing more and more people have more progress in their mental health issues, whatever that is. And when I say progress, I mean not the good progress, the more progressive. Mm-hmm. And that has really taken us all on just this journey we all just did not want to go on. And we don't have a choice. We're just in this.
But I'm seeing a lot too across friends and family and in our professional space is a lot of us are having really fundamental existential crisis about what we're supposed to be doing or our purpose. I think we're in a purpose crisis as well, especially as so many of us find ourselves out of work or struggling to find good work in these times. I have a lot of people I love in the arts, which are art is essential, music and comedy and singing and the physical arts are some things that I am familiar with, and while we believe they're essential, we couldn't keep those businesses alive and open. Broadway was shut down, which as someone from the suburbs of New York City was an amazingly sad sight to see. And so our artists and our creators and our people who bring life into our world for the purposes of giving us relief from all of those things that we have to think about all of the time are out of business to an extent. And there's only so much content that all of us can take in on a screen all day. And a lot of artists I know have felt stunted in their artistic development or their ability to produce because these are very sad times. And so where do we go? I've been working more hours, but I don't think getting anywhere near as much done, right? And so my swirl of work productivity versus where does my house start and my office end has been super confusing, as I think it has for so many of us during these times. And I guess, what's what, because we live in a society where you're judged for how many hours a week you work and how much like work product you are producing. And I've seen a lot of crash and burn this year, myself included, and an unhealthy approach to work and productivity and how we value ourselves in the definitions of that productivity.
Oh my gosh, yes. And that's one of the topics we're going to be discussing tonight. We don't want to make this about all doom and gloom. We actually want to be able to give you guys some tools. And
yes.
So we're going to talk about recovery capital. We're going to talk about the patriarchal concept of like doing more, pushing harder, you know, pulling your big girl panties on and moving forward with your day, and where that has come from and what that's done and how ineffective that is right now. And I'm going to also be taking us all through a meditative type of skill towards the end, so that we all have skills to give and share after this. And you do not have to listen to an 8-minute guided meditation at all. It's going to take you like 30 seconds max.
We have time for an 8-minute guided meditation.
No, you don't have to listen or watch a beach scene for 8 minutes to get out of deep breathing. What we'll show you. So
neurological benefits of just, excuse my French, calming the fuck down. Because lately I have a huge problem with not just calming down, but calming the fuck down. And excuse my French for those who might feel aversion to curse words.
Inappropriate.
It's just how I feel, but there's a difference between needing to calm down and calm the fuck down. So we're going to talk about bringing our brains, as our teachers have taught us for years, and what we know about brain science, to a new and healthier place.
Yeah. And like what you had said before about the productivity cycle, and even in therapy, like when I am working with people, we're just maintaining, man. I mean, if somebody can give me like yes, there are clients of mine who have goals and still are ambitious and revved up and ready to roll, and maybe just are eternal optimists, and that is amazing. I wish everybody could have a little bit of that juice. But for a lot of people, it's all about maintenance. How do I not regress? And I think that that's something that we just have to say, like, no one is expecting perfection right now. Nobody, whatever your goals are, we want you to achieve them. I want to achieve my own goals. But even if you just get up today and you brush your teeth and you go take a poo and then you go and like write an email, you have done it. Like you are golden for the day. Like we have to really reset our idea of achievement right now, for sure. So we're going to try to do that. And so did you want to say something before we talk about data?
No, let's talk about data.
Ooh, data. I love data and I hate data.
Should I throw out an early statistic?
You guys, here's the deal. We never have enough research, right? Like we're always looking for more research available. When we say like the available research suggests, it's because there's not enough available research. Like people are always asking me like, is cannabis really good for you? Well, the available research suggests these things, but we don't know enough because of Schedule I, and oh my God, that's a whole other topic. But okay, the point is, I love to hate data. Michelle just said that exactly. So what we know is that for mental health, people who already have diagnosed anxiety, bipolar, obsessive compulsive, and depressive and mood disorders are getting it's getting worse for them. Are new people developing mental health issues that they didn't have before? Maybe. But we don't have enough data from the studies that I read. But we do know that the people who do already have those issues are feeling it.
I am, yeah.
And the CDC also put out a report in like June about how much more created mental health issues because of stress, because of isolation, because of job loss, because of hopelessness, because of control. Like we just need to do something because of us being human. People are turning to alcohol, people are turning to drugs. I mean, like, yeah. if they didn't think this was coming, they did not plan well, which they didn't. We know that. They
was coming, and we never had the infrastructure in the first place
No.
to create the needed public health safety net for all of the manifestations of substance use disorders and mental health issues and serious mental illness as well. And because we didn't have it before, in an emergency, we were going to see just how much more quickly that would crumble. And thank God for platforms like this and Zoom, dare I say Facebook. I'm not happy with you folks over at Facebook for a variety of reasons. Stop sending me weird ads. I don't want them. But other than that, Facebook, if you're listening, please just stop with the depressing ads. Find another way to monetize. There's billions of us on your platform. But anyway, I digress.
But also, Zuckerberg. Okay, let's keep going.
Reset. Thank God for platforms like these, because they give us the social connectivity and all of the different rule changes this year around allowing the provisioning of mental health services and counseling over screens, despite maybe in the past not getting equal reimbursement for those things. And so I think in a way we're on a path towards fair reimbursement, and on the other hand, things like Zoom and Facebook and FaceTime have had to substitute for a completely broken mental health services system and rent.
Oh my gosh, I was thinking at the very beginning of all of this, when Zoom was so needed for everybody and everyone's like, which platform should I use? Knowing the stress of growing an organization, I felt for Zoom, who are now billionaires. Like they're
right.
doing great. So I don't feel that bad.
Yeah.
But ultimately,
we do commercial.
We do. I felt there. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is an operational nightmare, because everything is happening from family meetings to AA and recovery meetings of all kinds, to mental health and medical appointments, to government are voting on, different government entities are voting on things on this. So I think we just have to realize that what Danny said, we were not prepared for this, and that if anything has been proven, it's that if we're constantly in this reactivity place as a society where we're always just waiting for the ball to drop, oh, we'll figure it out once it hits. That isn't working. So we criticize other governments and other democracies even for the way that they have operated around universal systems. We can't even get our own shit together. So how are we going to tell another country who's battling this the same way, who's not doing great even, sorry, but you know, we're better. We're America. I'm sorry. I'm struggling. So there's other models and other ways.
We are diving into a much larger topic, which I'm okay with.
We are, but we do not have our shit together. We don't. And so we're trying to validate that for all of you guys, that none of this is normal. This is not normal.
And quick soapbox about this system that we're talking about, how it works, because actually I'm just going to go there. So a number of years ago, I was the health information technology lead at the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which is a federal entity under the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And we were at 10 years ago, we were at like the bleeding edge of health IT. Everybody was like 25 years ahead of us. But for behavioral health, for us to be talking about telemental health and video gaming for kids in recovery and all of the sort of different investments that we were making at the government and at the time, experimental treatment modalities that are now very normal today, that you would think that the Health Information Technology Department for Behavioral Health at the United States Department of Health and Human Services would have grown its portfolio around health information technology policy and the provisioning of substance use disorder treatment on the internet, right? Like that would be logical because it's 20.
That if there's a department for it.
Well, fun fact, as of, 4 years ago, that department pretty much got annihilated.
Right. Well, right. They carved out a lot of stuff, including that, right? So if we're going to be competitive on the world stage, if we're going to have systems that are meant to communicate with each other so that, so that we're all on the same page, we can help people quicker, we can respond to crises faster, we can save lives, we need behavioral health technology.
And we need to be making fundamental investments where we create a marketplace that spurs innovation by the private sector, because that's where all of the good shit comes from. And a lot of times that stuff is originally funded by the government, was my experience in government tech for so long, is that like the real bleeding edge stuff, the government had its hand in at some point because it was an original funder, and then private sector grows from that. And there is a market for the things that we're talking about, and it sort of took off in a completely different direction than how we are traditionally bringing care to people in substance use and mental health spaces. And we've had to learn a really quick lesson and catch up, which I think we've done okay at this past year. But all that to say is could have, would have, should have. Speaking of things I grieve, like we could have done better there, because we were starting to build infrastructure. And maybe that's a good segue to talking about the government ad hoc and and covering the topic of some of the things that happened, not just on the world stage, but in the legislative space this week. I think there's something I wanted to bring up about the great state of Illinois.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Illinois is a fast and freaky place. I mean, we've got we have a history of corruption in the state of Illinois. It's an amazing place. I'm from here. I grew up here. I love the people here. And I've been privileged to work with many legislators and governors over the last, 13 years. And today what happened was the Black Caucus passed an amazingly progressive, innovative package of bills meant to focus on racial justice and equity and equality. And they stomped through. They did an amazing job. But what was interesting about it, and I am not complaining about the work that they have done. I want to be very clear about that. I am a huge supporter of the Black Caucus package. I'm a huge supporter of doing bold things that needed to be done years ago. And that just happened today or over the last week. But what got left out, and what gets left out of most strategies, is mental health and frankly substance use. And so those got left somewhere on the cutting room floor, and that seems to be an ongoing theme that's happening across all state legislative entities, our federal government for sure. So this ties back into stigma, and it ties back into all of the kind of stuff that we're talking about, is when you don't invest in brains and brain science and brain health treatment, health, right, thank you. When you don't invest in health, you get what's happening right now. You get syndemics going on, the worst year on record for overdoses, suicides, obviously COVID deaths, which are obviously a biological issue. However, I'm sorry, a virus, but man, does the situation of having COVID take over your mental health. When we don't invest, we get nothing. We get depravity, destruction, we get all that we're getting. So this week has really made me think about how I definitely believe in our democracy, obviously, but how much do we actually, how much is any of this working? Like, I think if I'm probably not the only person who had that thought, like, is this working? And how are we going to get these folks who are making decisions for us every day to see the light, to put politics aside, to see the light? And I just don't have a lot of faith that that's going to happen, because guess what? The evidence is that it hasn't. So
we really do. Our body bags and our toe tags are piling up for the population that we're a part of and responsible for taking care of in our day work, right? We're piling up, and I don't think there's no other way to say that. And bodies are piling up because of the virus as well. And they're not just bodies, right? They're like our families and our friends and humans. And and the layers of grief and trauma that we're experiencing as a nation. I mean, we've really ripped the Band-Aid off of some Band-Aids over bullet holes this year, literally, no pun intended, to the extent where, I mean, even with last week, join us for another podcast, maybe next week here, our live chat, where I talk about what to put in.
So much
when I talk about what to put in my bulletproof go bag that I own, right? Because that's where we're at. We're, you know, in a society that's supposed to have transcended Maslow's, you know, pyramid of hierarchy of needs. So many of us are operating in fight or flight survival mode, you know, plus food insecurity, so many issues. We haven't brought as a society to that next spiritual place of living and being, right, that we talk about in our field so much. Right. It's a privilege to sit down and talk to a therapist, right? So I think that as a field, we ourselves, there's a reckoning that's here, it's coming. It's a moment for me and my work to turn internal and look at what I bring to the space in a healing way. What have I missed? A whole lot. And what are we bringing for this new iteration, this new year, right? Because, you know, we're still unable to access populations that we have been talking about. We have been unable to access for 50 years, actually, right? Mm-hmm. And definitely the last decade of like the current recovery movement that we find ourselves in. And so all of that to say, what the fuck, America? And where is the, you know, this field in and of itself? All we can do, like, there's so many things going on and we could talk about it for hours, but like as people, as two people who care very deeply about ethics in this field and coming from a perspective of justice and healthcare justice for the people that we serve, we got to do better. I have to do better, right? Like there is a serious reckoning that needs to happen about, in my way, have moseyed along all of this time thinking one thing, and this year have learned that a lot of that was incorrect.
I learned that everything that I have known doesn't, I mean,
right. Right.
I spent, right, like 80 grand on my master's program. I didn't learn shit about racial justice. You know what I did? I took one class that they make you take on bias and privilege, and it was a freshman class, and it impacted me in many ways, but it wasn't nearly enough. It was not nearly enough to prepare me to help people like the way they needed to be helped for the last 250 years. But moving forward, I need to be able to know what rooms do I need to be in, what rooms do I don't need to be in, when do I need to be talking and when shouldn't I be talking, who should I be talking to, who should I be seeking information out from, and where shouldn't I, and when should I just listen. That is a constant conversation I'm having in my own head of trying to take the call to action that has been placed on this field of therapists and advocates and experts in security and all sorts of other professionals in this workforce, which is too tiny, which is another topic that we'll talk about another time. How exactly am I supposed to be every moment of the day? And that's the hard part.
And how do you do all of that as the helper and the healer without burning out? Because I feel tired. And I'm unable to produce. I've seen myself make a steady decline in what I'm able to produce for myself and for other people, specifically for this last year, even more pertinently in moments of grief. And so if we're all operating on almost zero, which I know from confidential conversations I've had with so many of our colleagues, that everyone is really tired. And then we burn out enough people and they leave this field and they leave, you know, we lose more helpers. And that's sort of a scary, we already have a deficit of healers and helpers and counselors and therapists and social workers and psychologists and psychiatrists and people who have expertise in these things. We already have a doctor desert, right? And so if we can't take care of each other and also have really serious conversations about burnout, taking time off, productivity levels, expectations, you know, I'm like ready to sell all my shit and live on a farm by myself. That's where I'm at. Like,
Oh
shut
my
it all
God, right? I
down.
mean,
Shut
I
it
had
all down.
multiple conversations with my mom this year about going investing in an apartment in some other country so that we can just get out of this mess. Not to say that any other country has got this all figured out, but I get it. And so I don't know if you guys can see, but in the back on my shoulder right here, this dude, that's my brother, Alex, who many of you know died from an overdose. And I am constantly, I keep him there because I can see him, because if I lose sight of my why, I will give in to the tired too much. If I lose sight of the reason why I started doing this work and what I hope for my son will happen, which is not feeling the shame that he felt every day of his life, being somebody who needed a lot of things he just couldn't get. If I don't keep him there and we don't remember our why, we will not be effective. And so I think this is a good time, maybe, Danny, to segue into, maybe you can educate us on recovery capital and like a little bit about what that means and what that is, so that we can all, in the various ways that we lead in our lives, go out and use that knowledge to help us and thus help others. We have to be safe before we can keep other people safe.
Absolutely. And how I was taught about the term, and it's really been expanded upon over the last many years, and I'll keep it brief, is that it's qualitative and quantitative, tangible measurement of the things not only that I build in the process of recovery, but also those protective factors. It's literally, when we break it down, risk versus protective factor, it's a protective factor that contributes to positive affiliations with myself, how I feel about myself, how I feel about my recovery, and how I am intersecting with the world. And in my case, it's abstinence from substance use, but for many other people, that means a lot of other different things. So fill in the blank for that last thing that I just said, depending on your pathway and what you are in recovery from, and the path that you've chosen to live in this process of recovery as it's defined by SAMHSA. And so it's things like my job and my job stability. It's things like my education and pursuing education, familial relationships, my relationships with my finances, which, you know, connects to the job thing, but sometimes it doesn't. And about housing. Do I live in safe and stable housing? Is my housing safe? Do I live in a neighborhood that I feel safe and comfortable in? Or am I concerned at any moment I'm going to be evicted or lose my housing? And so it's a combination of all of these different elements that speak to, that can be quantified, but really in fact speak to the quality of my life. And I think in these times, I'm just going to speak for myself and the experience that I've seen around me, keeping the recovery capital ducks in a row during a global pandemic, when we are so unsure about things and about ourselves, and you know, in a lot of people's cases, if and where the next paycheck is coming from, that's extremely stressful, and it impacts our relationship to ourselves and to our recovery, depending on what it is that we are in recovery from. So that's just a little mini lesson on how we classify recovery capital.
So can we correlate that to something? Can we correlate that to like somebody who is dealing with depression?
Yes.
Maybe they don't have a substance use issue, but maybe they're dealing with depression. How do you go about plotting out recovery capital? Like, what tenets do you use? Like, are we asking about what are our values? Like, what do we value, and kind of, or like in an order, or like how would you tell somebody to go and figure out how to build recovery capital who is depressed?
Probably wouldn't, because I don't know of a model where I'm using uppercase recovery capital terminology, right, in reference to like a very specific way of measurement. But maybe we just pull away from the recovery capital conversation and talk about, you know, what are those intrinsic things that are quantifiable and feasible, right, that bring me to a place where where my symptoms feel like they don't affect me as much, because that's the best way I can translate it from recovery capital language. And I think that these times have given us an extremely interesting, and sometimes in my case, like a disturbing view of my own self, what matters to me, what's important to me. Not necessarily what are my values, but what am I willing to risk or sacrifice in the name of money, property, prestige, keeping my job, working too many hours, etc. Keeping a face, right? Not showing that anything is wrong. And how that affects my symptomology, which is like, I'm anxious as hell, right? Like I'm sweating just thinking and talking about it. So yeah, just put up wellness planning and building coping skills. And so, we talk about at Young People in Recovery, we talk a lot about life skills, and those meet all of the criteria of the things I was just talking about with housing and, personal economics and relationships. But also I have found most often that purpose-driven life thing to be, at the end of the day, what helps the head go down to the pillow, and not, the panic will wake me up at 3 a.m., but at least I got to sleep in the first place. And for me, that can be, for me and how I experience my symptomology and how I see so many other people that I work with experience the symptomologies, that's the best we can do on most days. I feel like I'm rambling here and that I didn't actually answer your question.
Well, you kind of did, because obviously everybody's going to have their own unique recovery capital model, right? And I think but the core of what you said is that there has to be a self-discovery process to get to the point of having recovery capital. You have to understand what your needs are, but you have to first understand what you're going through. And so I think that, if you're new, if you're like just realizing, okay, I feel unhealthy, or I feel like my health is being challenged right now, like being able to say that out loud and like frame it and actually describe it, those are things that are really hard to do for a lot of people who are stuck. And so I think the first thing is just being able to work with somebody, a friend, or even like a counselor if you can access a counselor, or a peer support person. Those are professionals. They're actually they're peer support people. Michelle, Marie, you're okay. Modena. I mean, there's a lot of people on here. Laura, me, you, who can do this stuff. But I think it has to come with an awareness that there's something going on.
Yes.
And that's the thing. We are spending so much time trying to maintain all of the chaos that we often can't feel the actual symptoms. Mm-hmm. We think, oh, I have diarrhea. Okay, this is just an example. I'm having diarrhea, not me, but in this scenario, I'm having diarrhea, or I'm having stomach issues. And this is not meant to be funny, but because this does really happen, and I hear this from a lot of my own clients. My stomach has changed. I just don't feel well. When you're not feeling good. Those physical symptoms are often manifestations of something much deeper and spiritual or mental that's going on in your body right now. So if you started to develop different symptoms than you're used to having, maybe you have panic, maybe you're sweating a lot more, maybe whatever the change physically or emotionally or in your heart is, there's something there. And I think what we're trying to suggest is that it doesn't have to be like that all the time. There's help, and you can get out of this yourself. You can work through it. I mean, and that's we want people to feel like they do have that choice. You do have a choice to face it.
Absolutely. And follow me here, because I think this actually bridges perfectly into our sort of last topic for the night, which is around this idea of hustle all the time, work, grind, never let them see you sweat, but the duck is calm on the surface but paddling on the bottom. All of the cliches, right, about what we want the rest of the world to see about ourselves, versus being able to take a moment to acknowledge what's actually going on, and fearing vulnerability will make us look weak, or all of the other sort of very societal feelings that we have about rest, right? I read an interesting article this year talking about this being a year of rest, and not because we've acknowledged it as a society, but because we've worked ourselves into needing rest.
Right.
And that this idea of, even because I still struggle with it, and like, listen, we've been around this stuff for a long time. We're read on the topic, we're degreed in the topic, and even still, I fall down the rabbit hole of, that's actually not what's wrong with me. Everything is fine. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to breathe life to it, and I'm just going to continue to stuff it down and push it through because I'm a tough girl, and money never sleeps, and I'll sleep when I'm dead, and all the other stupid cliches that we've been taught by this very capitalistic, not that there's anything wrong with that, patriarchal, there is something wrong with that, driven society that has taught us that the amount of stress we put into something equals our effort, when that's just not true. And I think it results in a lot of very tired, cranky, shitty work culture. I don't know if anybody here has ever worked in corporate America, and not all places, but places that I've seen, like just some like real crap culture around productivity, never showing weakness, showing no emotion at work, which is different than not making emotional decisions at work. Maybe that's a different topic for another time.
Yeah.
And that vulnerability is a sign that maybe you're not actively participating in your job. I've actually heard that.
And like, why would people want to be vulnerable if they're just going to get shamed for it? If they're just going to get, if at the end of the day, they're trying to be authentic, they're trying to be altruistic, but at the end of the day, it ends up backfiring on them because of the patriarchal concept that you're talking about of, putting on the face, just doing it. And then like the prioritization of, obviously we need jobs, we need to work. So everything else is just going to get put to the side because I need to do this, even though some of these other things are good for my health, like taking a walk or playing with your child. I do this like all the time. I have to like have a conversation with myself on a daily basis. Like, I know I don't need to scroll right now and read this. And there's Luke over there playing in the corner with his toys, So, but I thought that maybe, like, I read this amazing Brene Brown thing today, and I just wanted to read it with everybody because I think this really is at the root of it. And Michelle said we carry trauma in our body. And then Jen said the ability to express vulnerability is a superpower. It's a superpower because it's not that common to be able to really do it every day. It's true. I know. I agree. But she said today, and I guess this was more in context to what happened at the Capitol last week with the siege. Okay. Shaming the shit out of people for the trauma and hate-fueled violence we witnessed last week is so seductive. And if it worked, I'd do it. Even fully knowing the pain it causes, I wouldn't care. I'm that scared and anxious and worn down. But shame is not the answer. It changes nothing. It's easy and self-righteous, and it gives us the counterfeit feeling of having discharged our rage. But it changes nothing. It is just more self-indulgent behavior that adds to the shit that's covering all of our shoes. Shame is a function of dehumanization, and we need to have a serious conversation about how dehumanization and shame undermine accountability and corrode empathy. We need accountability, we need love, we need to own our history so our history doesn't own us. You can catch more on the Unlocking Us podcast by Brene Brown. But seriously, what she is saying, because she studies shame and vulnerability, is that we're going to want to do it. We're going to want to shame people because it makes us feel better. That's how judgment works. When you start judging yourself or somebody else, it's because you see that in yourself. Mm-hmm. We know that from lots and lots of research. But when we do it so much to the point, like, why would somebody want to talk to you if they think that you're going to judge them or shame them? Like, that's logical. But we don't realize that that's the root of it. And when we can see that and we can pull the veil off, we can see that the patriarchal concept is the symptom of not wanting to address shame and not wanting to address guilt and self-judgment. When we don't want to address that stuff, we get a society that's covered in covering, that's covered in the shit. patriarchal concepts of
for each other.
Yes.
And we cover, we cover for each other. And as a result of covering for each other, we end up putting each other in positions of not wanting to cause the other discomfort. So we avoid very crucial and fundamental conversations about our work, our lives, whatever it is that we're talking about in the moment.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's why you see a lot of people asking the question, how do I have a conversation with somebody who doesn't think the same as me about this? And it's a great question because it should be natural to want to talk to other people and know that we have difference of opinions, but shit is so shamed right now that the air is so crisp in that you just can't. It's hard to do. And then and how is it going to be inviting when somebody already is asking, why do the radical right or the radical left think this about this? Even that question is rooted in shame. Like, you should be ashamed for thinking this. We have to do better the way we think about asking questions, the way we think about, but it's ingrained in us, like you were saying, Danny. It is so ingrained in us. I think it's ancient. I really, really do. Because it's a survival tactic. It's all survival. So it has its upsides and its downsides. And so, and what you were saying earlier, like you feel like you're doing more, but you're not actually being more productive. Like, how many people think that? I think that some days too, you know? That's a part of this. It's all connected. And so if we could just let women run the world, I'm just kidding. I was joking.
No, it's, I mean, but to your point about the matriarchy, right? Which absolutely men can be leaders in and participate in, and we can adjust work culture in that way, right? I believe that's really true. We've hit sort of a point as a society, as a great democratic experiment, which is all we are still in our infancy as a nation, where we've hit a ceiling, unfortunately not a glass one. It almost feels like we've hit a cement one. And that the pressure cooker is exploding. We're watching it, and we're watching its effect on people. Oh, and there's a global pandemic going on at the same time, and people are hungry and unhealthy and unhappy and sad, and like, I'm pretty sure that's how the French Revolution started. And all you history folks can quote me out there. They were angry, but more than angry, they were hungry, and that's how this begins to go down. And so, taking a look at like the very unfortunate biological circumstances that we're putting people in. And back to that thing about holding trauma in our bodies. We are shining light in not a good way, in a very re-traumatizing way, in our daily conversations and how we interact with each other on Facebook. The guilt and the shame, the Buddha wrote about guilt and shame and how it operates, right? Like, we've been talking about guilt and shame and how it affects society, and how it's an additive that's similar to a material item that we carry around in a heavy ass backpack all day. Right? It's the same thing as wanting and needing, as yearning for things that take us off of our primary focus. Guilt and shame in our brains operates in the same way. Sorry, that was a neurological aside. But anyway, we're carrying around trauma, much of it generational, inherited. I'm a Jewish woman. And seeing Camp Auschwitz sweatshirts in front of a building that I have spent most of my career going in and out of was traumatizing beyond words, right? And I hard stop, right? And so we're carrying around all of this trauma, and we're literally injuring ourselves and each other in the words that we use on the internet, and the words that we use because we don't always know how to use our words. And we're hungry. Actually, literally, people are starving, and we're hungry for something better than what we have been given. And in the middle of that is helpers, the helpers of the world, who are also taking on a large amount of trauma. And so back to the patriarchy and this hustle grind all of the time thing. And we're trying to make we hope for you guys that we're making connections between all of these topics, because Chelsea and I did feel that these things were very much interconnected with each other, and that we were just going to go for the gold and see how we could make this conversation happen, right?
In like a real life context, if you're watching the news and your first inclination is when you see Nancy Pelosi or another woman to automatically come into that with judgment and with oh, like, you know what she's going to say, that is coming from a very, very deep place of hurt and trauma. I think the way women treat each other, the way that we have been trained now to talk and think about people who are our politicians and the leaders of our country, to think about them as the enemy and somebody not to trust. And maybe you're right, but truly, I mean, we can say this because we're in a democracy.
Right.
And we can do that. That's free speech, baby. But the truth of the matter is that I think that when do we, like you said, what did you say about the glass ceiling? You're like, the ceiling is...
It's cement. We're not breaking through it. We're,
yes, we're not. But that's also because we're still evolving as a country. And I think people are starting to understand why there is a retaliation against and I don't mean this against white men. I love many white men. Against patriarchal systems that are set up to be patriarchal.
Right, that are
in that
derived white supremacy. Yes, and like and like the discomfort. We're not talking about your specific people, right? We're talking about a system that is fundamentally broken, and that's rooted in white dominance and white supremacy and male dominance and male supremacy, and that's not, it's not a knock, right, on an individual people, and that's a part of the conversation that keeps getting lost. Like, we ain't trying to judge anybody when we're talking about this. We're talking about a system that all of us are participants in, and it's uncomfortable to break out of it because we haven't been offered a different, more feasible solution.
Yeah,
like, we actually haven't been given a rubric to building the matriarchy. We haven't, right? What does that even?
You know what? The funny thing is, we're seeing other countries do it. We're seeing New Zealand do it. Jacinda Ardern is a badass lady. I love her. I love reading about her and what she does every day, because she treats her phone and her Instagram like a walk into her life. She doesn't care who sees what she's doing. And I'm sure she does on a little bit of a level, because let's be honest, politics are politics. Is it Norway or Finland that's completely run by women under the age of 40? Like, I think we realize that there are benefits here to women leading, and we just have to see, we're working towards that. And that's, we can't lose sight of that. And this, again, isn't meant to be like a women's march, rah, rah, rah thing. But I think it all connects, and we're hoping that it's connecting for you. And one thing I think, and Modena, I love that you said that's how I feel when 45 speaks, because I think a lot of people do feel like that. When you see, no offense to white men, I'm married to one, when a white man talks at you, sometimes it can feel like they're talking at you, and that's not fun. So we have to just remember the experiences that women, that non-white people feel when they're being talked to by people who are in positions of power, but then they also don't trust those people. So that's generational, and what Danny was saying earlier is ingrained in us. And I think that until we kind of we find new tactics to get out of that, like, I would love to see Congress do a deep breathe before they actually start their sessions, using some Eastern traditions to approach the legislative session. Like, you've got your speech prepared.
Put it in the minutes. Congress needs a second to calm the fuck down. Not just regular calm down like I was talking about before, but to calm the fuck down, which is a special elevated layer of calming down and like listening to their breath. I think that's 100% correct. And also, we as women who are leaders in our field have an even deeper responsibility, because we do have our own given platforms, right, from which we are able to operate. I also need to acknowledge that it is comfortable for me, because I've been trained as such, to operate in the patriarchal system because it works for me, right?
How many days in a row are you the only woman in a room sometimes, or one of maybe a few? Yeah, every day.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I get that, and that's a part of our training, so it's ingrained in us that we have to be in this room. Well, we have a choice when we go into that room. How are we going to be in this room? Is this the time when I'm going to get my voice squelched, or is this the time when I'm going to not allow this room full of suits or whatever to intimidate me, and to just, and my power is here, I have it. But when we go into everything from a place of hurt, and not just for, and we don't do those, and we do not take care of ourselves or center ourselves, like before every therapy session, my supervisor has trained me to do either a walk or just take a 5-minute break to center myself. So I think one of the things that we need to teach all of you guys today is just a very simple, but very effective and evidence-based tactic. It's a deep breathing, okay? I talked to a couple people last week who told me they don't know how to deep breathe, and when I tell you that it's really, really easy, and there are some people who don't breathe all day. And when I mean breathing, I mean really breathing. So when we're breathing, we need to be focusing on breathing from our diaphragm, okay? That's that all the way past your stomach, you know. This is how singers, like trained singers, they master their diaphragms, and that's how they're able to hold notes for a very long time and be able to sing for a long time without breathing. If you can master your diaphragm, you really can, and master your breath, you can actually master a lot. So when you're breathing, it's often hard to get centered depending on where you are. Maybe you just had a really hard conversation with somebody. Find a place where you can actually, even if it's in like the corner of a hallway, where you can pretend to be on your headphones even. I want you to put both feet on the ground, just sitting up straight, both feet on the ground. Put your hands on your legs, just back a little bit from where your knee ends. And in that moment, you have now sat in like this centered position. And when you're ready, you breathe in for 4 seconds through your nose, and then 4 seconds out through your mouth, even if you have to push the breath out. And you'll know you're doing this right because your diaphragm is going to expand. Your stomach is going to expand. You're going to see it expand. So what I want you to do is put your hand on your stomach as you're breathing. And if you're not if you don't feel your stomach pushing out, then you're not breathing from your diaphragm yet. So this is a skill that just takes building. So I'm just going to model it for you. So I'm closing my eyes. Okay. I feel so much better than I did like 10 seconds ago. And
me too.
Literally, that is all you have to do to reset your brain. That's it. You just have to learn how to breathe. And we know this. And so people think, oh, I don't want to do a meditation to do mindfulness. I don't want to go on a walk. You don't have to. You literally just breathe. The way I trained myself to breathe is at stoplights. Every time the light was red, I would just breathe in and breathe out. And I have anxiety, so this was trained in me many years ago. Yes, we're not driving a lot, but breathing is really the key in the tool. And I'm just gonna like say, if Nancy Pelosi is listening, I really want to encourage you to start doing deep breathing with the caucus. I want you to do the deep breathing in the House, in the Senate, in your office, with your staff, with AOC, without AOC. I want everybody to be breathing together.
It's like green eggs and ham of congressional calm the fuck down. Put it on the agendas in the House with a mouse with the fox in a box. It's true though. I think that there's a lot to learn from, you know, and to your point, it is evidence-based that a couple of deep breaths remind our brains through that neurological pathway that needs oxygen in order to recognize that it's alive. So if you're shallow, we're just going to geek out real quick here on the neuro of this. Most of us are breathing shallow, really shallow all day because we're stressed out and we forgot to breathe. Yeah. And So what you're actually telling your lizard brain and your advanced brain, your frontal cortex too, is like, you're panicking, y'all, like all day inside of your own body. And your body thinks that you're running from something, or you are in danger because you're physically acting like there is a threat to you. And for all intents and purposes, living in the world today is a threat to you. So it makes sense that we are all shallow breathing. That deep breath, that oxygen inhalation, all of a sudden turns on things that have been in our brains since evolution began, from before we were humans, that said, oh, wait a minute, you're okay.
Yes.
You're not running away, and your whole entire system will respond to that. And frankly, these are not the times where we want bad immunity. So this is good for your immunity too.
Yeah.
And for our resilience, not just internally, but like physically. We are all trying to just survive a pandemic, for which I assume most of us are not vaccinated yet. And so, yeah, that's a little of like the goofy brain science behind why your brain thinks you're constantly running away. And it's because
oxygen is important. I think we learn that's something that we all know, but we don't practice it. So and the other thing is, if when you're done with like that 3 breath thing and you open your eyes, if you feel kind of lightheaded or high, even like you get a little zing from it, then you know it's working because your brain has officially reset. And I'm not trying to say this to like insinuate anything, but the point is that it's supposed to feel different, and it does take a little bit of practice. So if you are struggling with the breath, try to find a quiet time and a quiet place to just do it on your own. You don't have to do it here. And I like to do it like when I see a message that really pisses me off, like a text where I just want to respond really, really bad, but I know I need to go and breathe. And it's not perfect. I mean, I've made some mistakes there, but those are the times when the breathing really helps. So anyways, other coping skills and tools that are really important. Danny, do you have any to share that you like to do in your life?
I wish I could say I like to do them in my life. I have
just do
pack of them that I don't do, and I suffer as a result of that. But no, I think the breathing, we're little things, baby steps. So even if we could all just remember to breathe one time because we remembered watching this silly thing that the 2 of us did, I think that's worth it. I think continuing to bring coping mechanisms, it would be like 1 per Facebook Live, just like little things that we remember. And
that. So if all you take away from this is I learned how to breathe today, you're golden. And and your brain, remember, the heart doesn't control the body, the brain controls the body. So when your brain is like sending through your blood, through your veins, through the neural pathways in your brain, this kind of breath, it's helping to heal wounds, whether they're physical or emotional. So it's just the best healing tool that exists. And Brenda, my friend, said namaste. She's a yoga instructor. And I think it moves the trauma through the body. The trauma that we experience, it gets stored here, and it gets stored here a lot. It also gets stored in our lower back. It gets stored in our stomach. So if you're like a person who has a lot of issues in those areas, it might not be an actual chronic pain issue. It may actually be trauma that needs to be addressed. So just FYI. Okay, I'm done. I'm done. Okay, I'm with the mental health topic for now.
The message, we did. We went through our topics, and thank you all for joining us.
We went through our agenda.
We did it.
I'm so proud.
And I think we went in order too. And I don't even know if people realized that, which is even better. And so, I think the takeaway for me is I have to breathe through that grief a little bit. And that, I don't make New Year's resolutions because I just typically don't. I think what I needed to learn and hear myself say today is that I am an active participant in this work until you die, till your hands bleed culture, and it's not working for any of us. And as someone who has many people that work for them, to lead with responsibility and example and not perpetuate this culture and idea of if you are not working, you are dead.
Well, when you're dead, you're dead. Sorry, but that's okay.
Or even not.
Right. So like the message is that we want everybody to get is like track throughout the day. And I think that it's helpful to set an alarm on your phone. I do this like all the time of different random times during the day just to check in with yourself and just to sit and think, how am I feeling right now? If you are having a hard time connecting with that, you might want to just sit with your hand on your stomach and do the breathing. And just to find moments during the day just to check in and connect and to start that process of connectivity between your head and your heart and your gut. And when you do that, you just are building a practice almost. You just are, just like with yoga or anything else, you're just building a work ethic, a new thing in your work ethic of checking in. And then maybe, just maybe, you will figure out, oh my gosh, I'm really tired right now, or I'm hungry. You will take care of yourself the way that your brain was designed to take care of you. Because that's what it is. When you feed into whatever you're feeling, your brain is telling you, I need something, or your body is telling you, I need something. Give it to yourself. I need connection. I need a hug. I need whatever. I need alone time. I do not want to do this conference call. Do you have to do the conference call? Do you have to, can you move it? Like getting into that practice of so that would be the next step from breathing to action. So we're kind of like still in this discovery place. But next time we'll do more coping skills. I love them.
More coping skills, more breathing exercises, more controversial topics broken down from the perspective of public health. And yeah, Chelsea, thanks for having me on this again.
I just love talking to you.
You lift me up so we can lift up others together, and I think that's deep. Without you, I would not be sitting here, and for this I am extraordinarily grateful. So thank you for having me.
You lift me up too. And also I just wanted to shout out young people in recovery because Danny's organization that she runs, because they have recovery meetings going on all day, every day online, all recovery meetings, meaning it's free flowing in a way. Anybody can come and free. Mm-hmm. Young people in recovery. Seriously, that's a great tool for anybody.
Thank you, dear. Oh, I can't hear you. You might be on mute, but I'm logging off.